Are you wondering if you're dealing with a bad boss or dysfunctional management? In this video, we're going to talk about what are the signs of a bad boss and how do you work with them. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Ben Preston, author of Harness Your Butterflies and creator of the Career Accelerator program. If you are new to the channel, if you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button below. I have new videos every Tuesday. And without further ado, let's get into the video. I've had a lot of feedback on my channel about people resonating a lot with the videos that I put out regarding, is your boss jealous of you? Is your boss threatened by you? Those kind of videos. And I wanted to do a follow-up video for those, talking about what is a bad boss, what are the signs of a bad boss, and how do you work with them? Hopefully I can give you a little bit more information than the other videos that I've done, but I will link to the other videos as well. Okay, without further ado, let's jump into the signs. The first sign, the first big red flag that you have a bad boss is that they are a micromanager. That means that they are basically hovering over you every minute of the day, asking you what you're doing, telling you how to do things. And I'm not talking about a manager kind of giving you guidance. I'm talking about a manager who literally says, show me what you're doing every minute of the day. And I know that that sounds a little weird, but honestly, some managers do that. And if they are a micromanager, it's probably a sign that they're a bad boss. But what do you do about that? If you are being micromanaged, it's probably almost always that your boss doesn't trust you. And it's not that they don't trust you, it's that they probably just don't trust people in general, but you happen to be the recipient of their micromanagement. If you are being micromanaged, it's important to understand that it's not a you problem, it's your boss just isn't very trusting. But also you want to make sure that you have that conversation with your boss to outline what are the things that you should be doing to build that trust with them, whether it's building out project timelines, whether it's building out project reports, whatever the types of things or assets that they're looking for that help you build trust with them. It seems a little counterintuitive to kind of lean into the micromanagement, but what you want to do is find out a way to build trust with your manager, and then keep a record, keep an ongoing kind of report or list of the things that you've done, the conversations that you've had with your boss. And then that way, when they bring up conversations with you and they say, well, we never talked about this, or this isn't something we've done, you can say, I have everything documented, and just be really on your game. Helping your boss see that you are doing the things that you're supposed to be doing will bridge that gap and hopefully lessen the amount of micromanagement that you have to deal with. The second sign that you have a bad boss is they are a credit hogger, which means that they take all the credit for the team. If management gives them a thumbs up, they say, yep, this was all me, this wouldn't have happened without me. And in that case, obviously, if you are the one that did the work, it doesn't feel very good to not get your fair share of the credit. So what can you do? The first thing that you want to do is make sure that you're documenting your ideas, or making sure that when you have ideas that you need to share either with the team or with your supervisor, that they're written down somewhere. Not because you're planning on showing that to the executive team or anything like that, but you want to make sure that you have a paper trail of some kind that links your ideas to you being the originator of that idea. Mostly because if something happens where your boss leaves, they get fired, you want to make sure that you have that evidence that you can show either the next boss or the executive team, showing them what you're capable of in your thought process, because that might elevate you in the long run. The second thing that you want to do in relation to dealing with a credit hogger is talking to your boss, depending on what your rapport is with them. If it's in the moment, your boss just takes credit because they need to they want to impress their boss or something like that, that's a different scenario. If it's something that's happened constantly, you can ask HR for their perspective, and you can also have that conversation with your boss directly and just say, hey, I've noticed that this is something that's been happening. Depending on your rapport with your supervisor, sometimes it should be a little more direct. Sometimes it should be a little more passive, is maybe the right word to say. And sometimes it should be a little bit more nuanced in terms of the way that you approach your supervisor. The third sign that you have a bad boss is that they are demanding. I'm not talking about bosses who just demand that you do work or have a high expectation for you to complete a project. I'm talking about a boss who's making unrealistic, unreasonable asks or demands of you and the team in a short time frame, in an unrealistic project scope, things like that, things that you're not able to complete, or you know that they are putting this on your plate to make you feel overwhelmed or to intentionally kind of cause friction in your space, in your team. So what do you do if your boss is so demanding? It's important to set boundaries. This has nothing to do with your supervisor. If your supervisor is being demanding, if they just don't know how to manage a team, it's up to you to set boundaries with your team and with your supervisor. to make sure that they understand what your working hours are, what's required of you, what are the things that are within your scope of your role. And if they continually go outside of that and they try to make more demands than what you are able to do or what you have time to do, you want to make sure that you're setting boundaries with your supervisor. Now, if it's a supervisor that you work really well with, for example, you can have that conversation pretty candidly and just say, hey, I think you are really demanding on my workload. Can we figure out what the priorities are and then plan my workflow around that, knowing that I only have X amount of hours to work a day? Now, the second option is if your supervisor is really demanding and they're just kind of a jerk, it's going to be really difficult for you to have that conversation and set boundaries. But in that instance, I would say you need to be very professional, make sure that everything is written down, do some pushback professionally. You don't want to be rude, but make sure that you set your boundaries professionally. So if your supervisor puts on more work than you're able to handle, you can push back and say, I do not have time to work on this right now. If you would like to readjust my priorities, let's have that conversation. But as of right now, I don't have the ability to work on that project. Something as simple as that can usually resolve some of the demanding conversations. If it escalates, you might want to get HR involved, but the first two steps, the first two parts of that should help. The fourth sign of a bad boss is that they are inconsistent in their philosophy and expectations. Now, the thing that I love about with leaderships or even other YouTubers is they all have philosophies on here's how you should do things, here's how things should work. And I've had supervisors who say my management style is X, and then they do something very different. In that instance, them being inconsistent either in their expectations or their philosophy on leadership is probably a sign that they're a bad boss. Inconsistency is one of the things that erodes trust on teams. And so if you are leading a team and you are inconsistent in the way that you approach it, the way that you do the workflow, it makes it very difficult to lead your team based on trust, which is the core fundamental principle that teams need to survive off of, is being trustworthy. If you are a leader and you are inconsistent, it is not a good look. If you work for an inconsistent boss, it's not necessarily something that they're doing intentionally, and most of the time it is unintentional, but it's still a problem. So what do you do? Depending on your rapport with your supervisor, like the other tips, you can just say something up front and say, you've said this and I'm seeing this. What's the disconnect? You could have that conversation. Or if it's something where you're seeing your supervisor is just acting inconsistently, if it doesn't bother you, you can move on, or you can ask for clarity and just say, hey, I'm working on this project. Can you outline what your expectations are for this project? And make sure that you have it documented. So then in a month or 2 months or 3 months, when they come back to you and say, this didn't meet expectations, this didn't meet our goal requirements, this didn't meet anything else, you can show them that documentation and say, this is what you told me, you signed off on this, this is the expectation that you had set early on. That sort of clarification or documentation, or just making sure that you have all of your things covered, all your assets covered, is a great way of managing up and making sure that your supervisor is being more consistent, because they have to agree with the way that you're running your projects, the way that you're running your scopes, all of that stuff. And the last sign that you have a bad boss, the fifth sign, they're unwilling to support your overloaded workflow. If you have a pushback with your supervisor and you say that you're taking on too much, you try to set boundaries in a professional way and they push back and they say, no, you need to work overtime, you need to do more, you need to be more efficient, you need to do all this stuff. It's a really big sign that you have a bad boss. So what do you do? The best way to deal with a supervisor who is intentionally giving you too much without being supportive is to make sure that you're having a very direct conversation with them and make sure that you have things in writing. So you want to make sure that when you're having a conversation, you can say, I do not have all the time to be able to work on this. Here are the things that I have to do. And really, it's up to you to put your foot down. It is very difficult to do that sometimes, especially with a supervisor who's intimidating. But if you are overwhelmed, if you have a lot of things to do and you don't have the time to work on it, you can say, I don't have time to do this. If you are insistent on me taking this, you need to support me in this way, this way, this way, whether it's giving you more resources, whether it's giving you more time, whether it's giving you a pay raise, whatever that looks like for you, you want to make sure that you have that very direct conversation and then make sure that everything is in writing for those specific conversations. And that's all that I have for this video. If you found it helpful, obviously leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, a comment if you have anything else that you want to add, other signs of bad bosses. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit subscribe. I have new videos every Tuesday, so I'll see you on the next one.